Pick up a piece of wood today, and most people see something ordinary. Scrap, material, fuel, maybe a hobby project. But centuries ago, in the hands of Native American woodcrafters, that same piece of wood could become a weapon, a vessel, a tool, a cradle, a story, or a lifeline. What looks simple on the surface carried the power to feed a community, build a home, navigate a river, or preserve a lineage. Imagine a world where survival didn't depend on steel, electricity, engines, or factories. It depended on knowing a forest so well that each tree had a purpose, where the curve of a branch dictated the strength of a bow, where a single cedar trunk, hollowed with fire, stone, and patience, became a canoe capable of crossing vast coastal waters, where a carved mask or wooden staff could carry identity as clearly as language. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was decision-making shaped by centuries of trial, precision, and observation. Choosing the wrong wood could cost a hunt, break a tool, or sink a canoe. Choosing correctly created entire systems of travel, storage, and safety. What's breathtaking is how seamlessly practicality merged with beauty. Useful objects weren't plain. They were carved, etched, and shaped with care. A spoon might hold subtle patterns. A cradle board might contain finely carved details. A storage box might be designed with joints so exact they resisted water without a single nail. Nothing was accidental. Everything had intention. And all of this, boats, bows, carvings, shelters, utensils, came from wood shaped with stone blades, bone chisels, and technique passed down through generations. If you think woodcraft is just woodworking, prepare to see it transform into a window into survival, art, engineering, and identity. Subscribe now because every day we reveal the ancient technologies and lifeways that shaped this continent long before the modern world arrived. Long before sawmills, metal tools, or modern forestry existed, native communities lived inside landscapes where wood shaped nearly every part of daily life. But their connection to the forest went far beyond gathering materials. The trees around them weren't just resources. They were landmarks, indicators of seasonal shifts, sources of shelter, and partners in survival. Each region had its own vocabulary of plants: towering cedars along the northwest coast, hickory and ash in the eastern woodlands, and tough desert shrubs across the southwest. Different lands, different trees, different possibilities. Understanding the forest meant recognizing its patterns. People knew which trees thrived in damp valleys, which stood firm on windy ridges, which grew straight enough for bow staves, and which twisted just right for hooks or handles. Nothing was harvested blindly. Every selection was deliberate, because the wrong choice could weaken a tool or shorten its lifespan. A bow needed strength, but also flexibility. A canoe required buoyancy without brittleness. Even something as simple as a digging stick depended on choosing wood that wouldn't splinter under pressure. Time determined everything. Some wood was cut in winter when sap levels dropped, making it less prone to rot. Other materials were taken in summer, when bark peeled easily and could be shaped into containers or lashings. Even fallen branches were studied before being used. The forest was not a storehouse, it was a living guide. What made this relationship remarkable was its balance. Communities didn't strip forests or overwhelm the land. Instead, they took only what the environment could naturally replenish. Overharvesting wasn't just impractical, it risked destabilizing the very systems they relied on. In this quiet partnership, generations learned to see wood not as raw material, but as a companion, woven into every tool, every journey, and every home. Their legacy began with understanding, and from that understanding grew an artistry and practicality unmatched even today. To understand Native American woodcraft, you have to imagine a world where survival depended on choosing the right piece of wood at the right time and shaping it with absolute precision. Every tool, every weapon, every transport method came from understanding exactly how different woods behaved under pressure, moisture, fire, and weight. Wood wasn't simply carved, it was engineered. Bows are the perfect example. Communities in the eastern woodlands prized ash, hickory, and oak, woods with the rare combination of strength, elasticity, and shock absorption. A bow that was too stiff would crack, too soft and it would lose power. Hunters tested each stave by bending it slowly, listening for subtle sounds, feeling how the fibers pushed back. Carving wasn't rushed. A single mistake could ruin days of work, so shaping was done gradually, removing thin curls of wood until the weapon had the perfect balance of strength and flexibility. Canoes showcased another kind of mastery. In the Northwest, cedar was split and hollowed into vessels sturdy enough for ocean travel. Along rivers and lakes, birch bark canoes were crafted with wooden frames, stitched bark hulls, and resin sealant so flawless that they glided through water with minimal effort. These weren't just boats, they were transportation systems, built for long distances, heavy loads, and unpredictable currents. Even everyday tools carried layers of thought. Digging sticks were strengthened with fire hardening. Snowshoes used ash frames bent with steam and webbing woven from plant fibers. Clubs and axes were carved with intentional weight distribution, ensuring they struck with maximum force without breaking. Nothing wasted effort. Nothing relied on luck. Each object solved a problem. How to hunt efficiently, travel safely, gather food, build shelter, or survive harsh seasons. Woodcraft wasn't a hobby. It was the foundation of daily life, shaped by skill and sharpened by necessity. These tools didn't just help people survive, they allowed them to thrive. In many cultures, art is separate from daily life, reserved for special occasions, galleries, or decorative objects. But among Native communities, woodcraft blurred the line. A tool could be practical and beautiful at the same time. A paddle, bowl, mask, or cradle board carried function on the surface and meaning beneath it. Craftsmanship wasn't limited to ceremony. It appeared in the objects people touched every day. Take wooden bowls and utensils. On the surface, they were simply implements for eating and serving. But look closely, and subtle carvings appear. Curved lines following the grain. Patterns shaped to fit the hand. Details added not for luxury, but to honor the maker's skill and the object's purpose. These were not plain items. They were expressions of identity, built into the wood itself. Cradleboards offer another glimpse into this blend of beauty and utility. Built to safely hold infants, they were shaped from tough yet flexible woods, and often decorated with patterns or small carvings. These details weren't just visual. They reflected regional styles, family heritage, or the maker's personal touch. In a single object meant to carry a child, you see safety, craftsmanship, and visual expression intertwined. Then there were ceremonial items, masks, staffs, dance paddles, and carved figures. These pieces often pushed the limits of woodcraft. Some masks combined multiple woods joined in intricate ways. Others were shaped through steaming, bending, or hollowing techniques that required exceptional control. Totem poles of the Northwest stood as towering achievements of design, carving, and storytelling. Each figure representing lineage, history, or an event spoken through carved form rather than written language. What's striking is that none of this was treated as optional embellishment. A well-made object deserved respect and care, which meant giving attention to detail. Whether a hunter's tool or a ceremonial carving, Woodcraft carried layers of meaning inside every line, groove, and shape. In this world, artistry wasn't separate from survival. Art was woven directly into the fabric of everyday life. If you look closely at traditional native woodcraft, a striking pattern emerges. Nothing was taken without a plan, and nothing was harvested in a way that weakened the forest. Survival depended on long-term thinking, so the techniques behind gathering wood were just as important as the techniques behind shaping it. This wasn't just craft. It was a blueprint for how to use a landscape without diminishing it. Harvesting started with observation. People learned which trees recovered quickly after cutting, which species grew in clusters, and which ones supported entire ecosystems. Cedar, for example, was prized in the Northwest, but only certain trunks were selected for canoes, and only sections were removed to keep the tree alive. Bark was peeled in controlled strips, not full wraps, allowing the tree to continue growing. Willow shoots were gathered after new growth appeared, ensuring enough remained for baskets, traps, and tools the following year. Fire, often misunderstood today, was used with care to encourage new growth. Low-controlled burns cleared underbrush, opened sunlight for young saplings, and reduced pests. These burns weren't destructive. They were deliberate resets that made forests healthier and more productive. Tools were made to last, not to be thrown away. A well-crafted bow could endure for years. A canoe might serve multiple generations. Even smaller items like awls or handles were repaired or reshaped instead of discarded. This mindset reduced the need for constant harvesting and preserved materials for future seasons. Nothing about this system relied on excess. It relied on understanding cycles. How long wood needed to cure? When bark separated easiest? When branches bent best for snowshoes? And when certain trees offered the strongest fibers? This approach wasn't about restraint for its own sake. It was about maintaining balance so that the forest continued to provide shelter, tools, travel, and safety for countless generations. Today, as sustainability becomes a global concern, these time-tested practices feel less like old traditions and more like guidance for the future. Walk into certain workshops today, in remote villages, cultural centers, or the back rooms of modern studios, and you'll see something remarkable. The return of ancient woodcraft, not as a museum artifact, but as a living practice. Across North America, indigenous artisans, carvers, canoe builders, and tool makers are bringing back methods that nearly disappeared under centuries of disruption. And they're doing it with the same patience, precision, and creativity their ancestors carried into the forest. Some artists carve masks from old-growth cedar, using techniques taught by relatives or revived from community archives. Others shape traditional paddles or feast bowls, following measurements passed down through generations. In the Great Lakes region, canoe makers are steaming and bending birch bark just as their families once did, stitching seams with spruce roots and sealing them with pine resin. Farther north, carvers are crafting snowshoes with ash frames and hand-woven webbing, not for decoration, but for real winter travel. These aren't replicas, they're continuations. Each piece carries the distinct style of a region, sharp angles from the Arctic, sweeping curves from the Northwest, tight geometric cuts from the woodlands. And yet each one is made for use, whether in ceremonies, on the water, or on the trail. Technology hasn't replaced these crafts. In many cases, it's helping to preserve them. Digital archives store old carving patterns. Workshops live stream classes to students far from their homelands. Youth programs pair elders with teenagers, ensuring knowledge moves forward rather than fading out. What could have been lost is now re-emerging, stronger, more visible, and more widely appreciated. This revival isn't just cultural, it's also practical, modern builders study traditional woodcraft for clues about efficient design, natural materials, and long-lasting construction. Outdoor enthusiasts recognize the advantage of well-shaped wooden tools over synthetic ones, and communities see these crafts as a way to reconnect with traditions through action rather than nostalgia. The future of woodcraft isn't behind us. It's being carved, shaped, steamed, and stitched right now. Before a single tool was carved or a canoe was shaped, the work began in the forest, with choosing the right tree. This step was so important that an experienced maker could walk through the woods and identify what each tree could become just by looking at its posture, grain, and growing conditions. Tree selection wasn't guesswork. It was a practiced skill, built through careful study of how wood behaves over time. Different tasks demanded different qualities. A bow required wood with a long, straight grain that could flex repeatedly without cracking. That meant ash, hickory, or osage in certain regions. Woods that offered the rare mix of strength and elasticity. For canoe frames, builders sought lightweight but resilient woods, like cedar, spruce, or birch. For handles, clubs, and tools that needed impact resistance, they turned to hardwoods such as maple or oak. Even within a single species, not all trees were equal. A tree growing in a windy clearing might develop stronger fibers from constant movement. One growing too close to others might grow straighter but weaker. A tree that leaned or twisted slightly could provide natural curves for hooks, snowshoe frames, or bows that required strategic bend. Makers didn't fight the natural shape, they used it. Seasons mattered too. Wood cut in winter had lower moisture, making it more stable and less prone to rot. Bark harvested in spring peeled freely and could be used for containers, sheathing, or weaving. Resin-rich branches were collected in summer for sealing seams or reinforcing bindings. And then there was the grain. Skilled crafters checked for knots, tight growth rings, or irregular patterns that might weaken a finished object. A bowmaker might reject 5 trees before finding one with the perfect balance of growth and straightness. This process wasn't rushed because the tree wasn't just raw material. It determined the success, strength, and longevity of every tool shaped from it. Understanding the language of wood began long before carving ever started. Before metal blades reached the continent, native woodcrafters shaped entire worlds using tools made from stone, bone, shell, and fire. To modernize, these tools might look simple. In practice, they demanded a level of precision and patience that rivals any modern workshop. Every object carved in wood began with mastering these instruments of transformation. Stone adzes and celts were the workhorses. Crafted from hard stones like basalt, greenstone, or flint, they were shaped through hours of grinding and polishing until their edges were sharp enough to chip, shave, or hollow wood. These tools were often hafted onto wooden handles with rawhide or plant fiber bindings, giving them leverage and control. Canoe builders used stone adzes to hollow out massive cedar logs, chipping small sections at a time until the interior took shape. Bone tools provided finesse. Awls made from deer or turkey bones pierced holes for stitching bark, lashing canoe ribs, or weaving snowshoe webbing. Rib bones shaped into scrapers smoothed surfaces after carving. Antler tines became wedges for splitting logs into planks or staves. Shells, especially those from coastal regions, served as scoops, scrapers, or small cutting blades. Then there was fire, an essential tool in itself. Builders used controlled burning to soften wood fibers, hollow logs, or bend branches. Fire hollowing a canoe required a delicate balance. Too much heat and the log weakened. Too little and the wood remained too tough to carve effectively. Skilled makers used water, wet moss, and constant attention to keep the burn even. Without metal, every step demanded time. Shaping a bow might take days of shaving, scraping, and adjusting. Forming a spoon bowl required scraping layer after layer until it reached the perfect depth. Creating a canoe was a community project measured not in hours, but seasons. Yet the results speak for themselves. Sleek paddles, durable tools, beautifully carved figures, and vessels capable of crossing harsh waters. These creations weren't defined by the absence of metal. They were defined by mastery of technique. Some of the most remarkable achievements in Native American woodcraft didn't stand on land. They moved across rivers, lakes, and coastal waters with a level of grace and efficiency that astonished early observers. These watercraft were not crude vessels. They were engineered to solve specific travel challenges: long distances, heavy loads, unpredictable currents, and tight waterways. Each region crafted its own solution from the wood available, creating a diverse fleet of designs unmatched in adaptability. In the birch-rich regions of the Great Lakes and Northeast, builders created canoes that seemed impossibly light, yet incredibly strong. The frame, shaped from cedar or spruce, was steam-bent into elegant curves, then covered in sheets of birch bark, stitched tightly with spruce roots. Pine resin sealed the seams, making the canoe watertight. The result? A vessel light enough for a single person to lift, fast enough to travel great distances, and durable enough to navigate rocky rivers. Fur traders later copied the design, because no European boat could compete with its performance. Farther west, where birch trees were scarce, different strategies emerged. Along the Pacific Northwest, canoe makers carved entire vessels from single cedar trunks. These canoes could be small enough for river fishing, or large enough to carry dozens of people through choppy coastal waters. Hollowing them required days of controlled burning, carving, and shaping. When finished, they cut through waves with astonishing stability, their hulls designed to handle the rough Pacific without capsizing. In the southeast, dugout canoes made from cypress or cottonwood were staples for swamp and river travel. These boats were sturdy, resist rot, and maneuver gracefully through narrow channels and shallow wetlands. What all these designs shared was precision. Every curve affected speed. Every joint influenced stability. Every material choice determined how far a canoe could travel before repairs were needed. When people picture traditional weapons, they often imagine stone spear points or flint blades. But wood formed the backbone of nearly every tool and weapon used across the continent. A skilled maker didn't just carve wood, they shaped leverage, force, balance, and precision. Their choices determined the success of a hunt, the reliability of a tool, and the safety of their community. The bow is the most iconic example. A well-made bow wasn't simply bent wood. It was a calculation of tension, grain, and resilience. Makers shaved each stave gradually, testing the bend with small pulls, adjusting thickness along the limbs until both sides flexed in perfect symmetry. Paired with arrows crafted from dogwood, willow, or reed shafts, the result was a weapon capable of incredible accuracy. Fletched with feathers and tipped with stone, bone, or hardened wood, these arrows flew far, straight, and fast. Spears, lances, and atlatl darts relied on similar mastery. Straightness mattered, weight mattered. A slight twist in the grain could throw a dart off course. Makers compensated by turning branches, steaming them straight, or carving replacements from carefully selected saplings. Fire hardening strengthened spear tips, giving them sharpness and durability without metal. Clubs and striking tools show another side of woodcraft. Carved from dense hardwoods, they were shaped so the weight concentrated at the head, while the handle remained balanced and comfortable. Some carried subtle carvings for grip. Others incorporated stone blades hafted securely into wooden bodies. Even everyday tools required skill. Axe handles needed to absorb shock without snapping. Fish traps used flexible branches woven into intricate shapes. Mortars and pestles, carved from single logs, were durable enough to withstand years of pounding and grinding. In every object, wood served as the foundation of utility and design. A maker didn't view it as limitless or uniform. Each piece of wood carried its own strengths and challenges. Understanding those qualities and shaping them into tools that endured was both survival strategy and quiet craftsmanship. From the moment the day began until the last embers of night faded, wood shaped almost every part of daily life in native communities. It wasn't just used for tools and transportation. It formed the structure of homes, the rhythm of work, the creation of storage, the preparation of food, and the comfort of rest. A world built with wood wasn't fragile or temporary. It was stable, adaptable, and deeply practical. Inside homes across the woodlands and coastal regions, wooden frames supported bark-covered walls or woven mats. Roof beams held up layers of insulation. Floors were lined with planks or raised platforms. Even in regions dominated by earth lodges or stone dwellings, wood provided essential support. Roof poles, door frames, cooking racks, and storage shelves.